Hey, welcome to another Independent Surfer review. My name is Jordy and I'm the founder of the Independent Surfer. Today, we're going to be reviewing an intermediate level surfer who sent over some footage from the Maldives and it looks absolutely pristine. They're absolutely shredding down the line, but we're going to touch on some things that will hopefully help Carl, who's the surfer, and you improve your surfing. Some topics we're going to cover in this video are the pop-up, bottom turn, speed generation, and then a little bit of wave structure so that you understand and know what to do and when to do it. So let's dive straight into the review. So pop-up, down the line, deep bottom turn, speed generating down the line, and still going, now going for the cutback. Cool, so there's a lot to work with here. Carl's at a really good stage in his surfing where, he's figuring out the speed generation, and now I reckon probably the next step is to figure out how to do turns. So I always like to start from the base, and one thing that I want to explain is that your pop-up, how you pop up will define the rest of your wave. It's that simple. If you're making any mistakes with the pop-up, like landing your feet in the wrong place or popping up too far forward on the board, so on and so forth, it's gonna hinder your performance on the wave. So if you're somebody who's struggling with the bottom turn, struggling with speed generation, struggling with the top turn, you probably want to go and review your pop-up. And that's going to be the base cause of you missing out on not being able to do those other activities or those other maneuvers, if you will. If we're being really critical, we're going to start with the way that he's paddling in and where he's looking. Imagine you're playing, I want you to imagine this scenario. You're playing catch with somebody, you're throwing the ball to somebody, and they're throwing it back to you. Imagine yourself in a situation where instead of looking at the person and looking at the ball that you're playing with, you tend to look, say, at a tree that's next to you. As soon as your friend throws the ball to you, if your gaze is at the tree, you're not going to be able to know the trajectory of the ball, have any attention towards it, and know exactly where you need to be, catch it. For all you know, that ball could hit you straight in the face and you'd never even see it coming. It's kind of the same concept with the wave. A lot of people who are kind of into that beginner, intermediate stage, as they're paddling in, they tend to put a lot of attention in front of them, rather than paying attention to, one, where the wave is behind you, and two, what's happening down the line, because that's so, so important. That's going to be the next place you're going to go to. So another analogy, just like driving a car, you really need to be looking where you're going, otherwise you're going to end up having an accident. But it's really common in this situation for us as surfers to want to look straight ahead because that's just naturally how your body wants to be when you lie down. It's also pretty unnatural for your head to look one way while you're popping up. So this is something that you need to get used to. And if you're not used to it, it can easily throw you off balance. So what's the solution here? It's practicing at home, but simulate the scenario that you're going to be in. So most people who practice their pop at home might just practice it and look down at their feet or maybe just look straight ahead of them. But you need to be looking in the direction that you're assuming that you're going to go. So instead of just practicing and being unaware of how to practice your pop-up, really pay attention to things like where your feet are landing, where you're looking when you're popping up, so on and so forth, so that you can then apply it in the water. Because when you paddle into a wave, you don't want to be thinking about the pop-up. You want to be thinking about your position to catch the wave, which Carl is doing a great job of here. And then you also want to be thinking, as soon as I stand up, what kind of a turn is the wave going to allow me to do? Cool, so now that's established. We always try and work from the head down. And in this scenario, we can see that Carl is looking ahead. And let's see when he pops up. So noticing the pop-up, looking down, either down at the board or ahead of him towards, say, the beach. But as I mentioned before, while you're popping up, you really want to be looking down the line so that you can tell what's happening in this area of the wave so that you can do your next maneuvers. So before we continue with the video, I just wanted to tell you about our surf retreats that we'll be hosting next year. Keep an eye out for them. It's an all-inclusive retreat in a tropical paradise in Nicaragua. We're gonna be surfing all day, doing video reviews just like this, theory classes, and doing insane things like volcano boarding down active volcanoes. Then check out our retreats happening between Jan and March 2025. You absolutely do not want to miss out. So the next thing that I want to focus on, because it's a big thing here, is the feet. So it's funny because when you get to an intermediate level or an advanced level, all you want to do is like practice these like advanced things like, oh, I want to do snaps and I want to do this and I want to do that. And you're just so far ahead of where you should be. And people often get stuck, they plateau, and they're like, oh, well, why am I not progressing? You know, like, why am I not making any progress? And the funny thing is, it always comes down to these really small little mistakes that you don't even think are bothering you at all. But when you go and look at the footage, you can see it. So in this situation, I want to talk about his feet placement. So Carl, I'm super happy with the pop-up in general. One thing that you're doing really well is keeping those hips nice and low. So if we just pay attention to the hips here, they're staying much lower than the body. And this is a really common mistake that a lot of beginners make. And you're doing a great job to keep that back nice and flat. Even better to have a slight angle to keep those hips underneath the head. Because if you bring your hips high, that's raising your center of gravity, and that's going to throw you off as you go from this crouch down position to lifting your whole body up. So as I said, you've done a good job of that. But what is happening is you landed your front foot a little bit off to the side. So if we just pay attention to this front foot, and now you might be thinking, oh, it's just a little bit, like it's really not that big of a deal. But your board is a super sensitive piece of craft, and the thing that turns the board is where you apply pressure to it. So if you're applying pressure to this rail, then the board's going to want to turn that way. If you're applying pressure to this rail, then the board's going to turn that way. That's why you have these like curved outlines, and that really is what's going to help you turn the board. In Carl's case, he's put one foot on one side of the stringer and the other foot on the other side. A surfboard is designed for you to apply most of the weight towards the back of the board. If you apply too much weight to the front of the board, what happens is once we get past this like curved section, as it's like curving back towards the nose, if you apply too much pressure towards the front, the board's going to have a hard time to turn, because the responsive part of the board that turns is where the fins are at the back. With his front foot being off to one side, as he applies pressure to this rail, which is the most important rail, it's his inside rail, the rail that he needs to bottom turn on. As he's applying pressure to the front, because his other foot's more or less on the other side of the board, when he tries to apply that same pressure to the back of the board's not going to respond in the correct way. So what I'm getting at here, to simplify, is you absolutely have to be landing your front foot and your back foot in the middle of the board, because if you're landing off to one side, when you go to apply pressure onto the rail, in his case, because he has it too much over to the side, he's going to have to be really conservative about how he puts pressure on the rail, and he can't fully commit to leaning onto the rail, which basically means that anything else that he tries through the rest of the wave is going to be hindered, or it's going to be made much more difficult because of how he has landed his feet on the board. And so, theoretically speaking, if for us to expect him to be able to do anything more in this wave is really just kind of not, it's possible, but it's so much more difficult. So I just want to emphasize the importance of the pop-up and having your feet in the right place. You might be way off in the distance thinking about, oh, I need to speed generate more, or oh, I need to do these amazing turns. But the real reason that you might be struggling is really just rooted in the pop-up. And a lot, I would say like 90% of the time that I'm having clients, like their problem is rooted within the pop-up. So guys, fix your pop-up at home, practice at home as many times as you can, review it, take a video, because as I said, you can see the proof is in the pudding right here. But Carl does a great job of getting down the line in a timely manner. Even though his feet are in the relatively wrong place, he's still able to control the board. So if we had to just move on and assume that Carl had his feet in the right place, let's talk about the things that he could have done to surf this wave a little better. So now we're getting into the stance and how you stand on the board. That would be the next thing to talk about. And one thing to understand is that when you are quite compressed, it's really important to get compressed when you're surfing. Most people have the problem of standing too tall and not utilizing their knees and having like an active stance. In Carl's case, which is quite ironic, and some people are going to disagree with me, but just hear me out. So I think that in this situation, Carl is a little bit too compressed, actually. He's like in this seated position. And once you get into this seated position, it can be really hard to find any sort of mobility in your hips. So I want you to try this sitting at home. I want you to stand tall and try and rotate your hips. Now what I want you to try and do, if you have the time, is get into a squatting position and then try and rotate your hips. And you're going to see that it is 100 times harder to rotate your hips in that squatting position. So although it's important to be able to get this low in certain situations, you really want to be a little bit more extended, Carl, in order to be able to rotate the upper body and get a more rigorous or a more like, exaggerated bottom turn in to go up towards the top of the wave. If you are not doing this turn at the bottom of the wave, you're never going to be doing those radical turns at the top of the wave. Your bottom turn defines the type of top turn that you want to do. So if your movement on the wave is pretty much down the line all the time, and you're never getting that really, really good bottom turn in, as Carl is doing here. So if we see him, a lot of it's down the line. Very, very, very lateral surfing, just this way. And what we want to try and get Carl to be doing is surfing much more like that. That leads me to the next thing. So we spoke about stance and we talked about the hip rotation. Remember, if you're too much in a squatting position, you're going to find it really difficult to rotate your hips. So stand up a little bit, but still be active in your knees. The next thing we're going to be talking about is not just being, in an active position and static, but being active and dynamic. So active being, meaning that you're engaging your legs. You're not just standing there too relaxed on the board, but you're really active in the way you stand. And dynamic means a lot of movement. You need to be moving, extending and compressing through the knees and throwing your weight around a bit more in order for you to speed generate and stay ahead of the wave so that you can put your turns in the right place. I want to point out Carl here quickly as he's paddling into this wave. I want you to notice, I'm going to speed it up quickly, and I want you to notice how many speed pumps Carl gets in. I'd say that's the first one. 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, and then another 1, 5. But although he's getting these speed pumps in, they're quite small. You're doing a great job, Carl, and this is the basis for speed generation, but I would love to see you extend and compress a little bit more. So he's getting a lot of speed generations in, or speed pumps, but I would say it's just this first drop down towards the bottom of the wave that is really putting him behind the section. What he really needed to do is take much more of a higher line in the beginning to traverse the wave a little quicker, so that then he can come down once the wave slows down a little bit in front of him, to then get down towards the bottom of the wave, do his bottom turn to do the top turn. And I'll show you a reference here. It's not exactly the same, and of course I am on my forehand, but you can just see, I would just like to show you how much more active I am in this situation. So a lot more active in the arms, active in the knees, and I know this is on my forehand, so I know it's a little bit different, but still the emphasis that I'm trying to make here is that you need to be active when you get up onto the wave. And if you want to get down the line, you need to keep a high line and traverse across much quicker. Okay. So again, let's just show for reference. So here we go. Notice my turn. I'm not allowing myself to go down towards the bottom of the wave. Whereas if we watch Carl's wave here, notice that he's not taking this line here across, but he's actually drawing a line down towards the bottom of the wave first. And that is making it difficult for him to get down the line quick enough. So a little bit more active and a little bit less compressed. So as you stand up in that compressed position, but going straight to extend to help you keep a higher line here, Carl, so that you're not dropping down towards the bottom of the wave first. You're just completely traversing across immediately because of how quick this wave is ahead of you. Once you get that done, because you were able to keep up with the wave even though you dropped down towards the bottom, that's a real indication to me, a real good indication that if you had initiated that first bottom turn sooner, gotten down the line quicker, or traversed higher up the wave in the beginning, that you would have actually been able to stay ahead of the wave and then drop down towards the bottom and get a few turns in. There is so much more for us to dissect with this video, but it's important for you, Carl, and those of you out there to know that, again, so simple. We're just going to try and focus on the pop-up, especially for you, Carl. I would say, don't think about the speed generation. Of course, you do need to be more active. In this case, you do need to traverse across down the line a little quicker. But I would say 3 things to focus on. Okay, so if you find yourself in a similar situation to Carl, the first thing that you really need to do is look down the line. It seems so simple, but I promise you, it's going to change your surfing forever. Do not overlook how important this aspect is, okay? Number 2, be sure that you're landing your feet in the right place on the board. So, land feet in right place. And an extension in order to practice this is just practice your pop-up at home. I can't stress to you how important it is. There's no other way for you to do it. You're only going to catch 5 to 10 waves every time you go surfing, but you can do 100 pop-ups in less than 10 minutes. Well, depending on how fit you are, but you get the gist. In 2 hours of surfing, you can do 100 pop-ups at home pretty easily, but you're only going to get, say, 5 to 10 tries in the water. So practice your pop-up at home. And then the third thing is that you really need to focus on is being more dynamic. And that's extending and compressing through the knees in order to get a faster speed generation in so that you can stay ahead of the wave and not end up in... And it's different, like this doesn't apply to every single wave, but the better you are at speed generation, the better you are going to be at surfing. And that's just the gist of it. It's super simple. No need to overcomplicate it. Just 3 things. Number 1, look down the line when you pop up. Number 2, land your feet in the right place. Otherwise, you're going to have a really hard time. And in order to do these 2 things, you just have to practice at home. Just practice at home. And number 3 is to be more dynamic. Extend and compress. Throw your body weight around on the board a bit more. And once you have these things down, you'll find it a lot easier to do turns.